Hi everybody, this is Brooke Bacon. I just wanted to let you know that our webcast will be starting shortly. We are just going to give you a brief overview of GSI while you wait. So who is GSI? GSI is a full-service consulting and managed services organization with deep application and industry knowledge. This deep knowledge allows us to develop advanced AI and automation that delivers cutting-edge intelligence. This unmatched intelligence is what enables our clients to thrive and not just survive. So why partner with GSI? GSI is a full-service ERP, SaaS, cloud, ITSM, cybersecurity reseller, consulting, and managed services organization. We have industry, application, and technical certifications, and we not only understand the business system you are utilizing, but most importantly, the industry. Advanced AI and automation are used in all of our products and services to help our clients reduce TCO and increase ROI. We have offices nationwide and partners worldwide, which allows us to offer a 24/7 global support model. And we are the only partner you will find in the industry that has a 100% guarantee on everything we do. Here are a few of the awards and accreditations and certifications we have received. Our mission is to make every customer a client. To accomplish this mission, we create a culture that attracts and retains the most creative, energetic, and experienced professionals. As you can see from these testimonials, our clients attest to the fact that we focus on the business value of their systems, not just the performance. This business value focus allows our clients to transform antiquated systems of record into market share expansion machines.
Morning to all folks on this call. My name is Pat Begirathan. I'm a senior manufacturing consultant for NetSuite. Today, our agenda is going to cover manufacturing work in process, WIP, setting up of items as WIP assemblies, what are the differences between discrete versus process manufacturing, how do you generate a work order from a sales order, ordering items based on a reorder point, fixing consumption quantities, typically in a process manufacturing scenario, which can also be used in discrete manufacturing, material issuance at time of completions, that is a backflush, or individual work order completions, where you can complete independent of an issue. And then work order close, which could be performed in bulk or on an individual work order, and a demo at the end. So let's walk through manufacturing work in process. Typically, you have work orders to assemble items needed to produce an item. So when we want to track work orders through the production process, we use manufacturing WIP. So gathering materials through the shop floor assembly to stock finished items. And you can divide them into, three major areas. One is issuance of work orders, where raw materials are moved to an assembly area. You can perform issuance on many work orders or just one work order. Or you can complete a work order, assemble raw materials, and stock the finished goods. That's a separate process in WIP. You can perform a reconciliation of variances at time of closing a work order. And you can perform a bulk close or a single work order close. At the end, you can track the progress of the production process by going to the related records and reviewing the work order issuance, completions, and the work order close, which is used for tracking against the work order. So this is a really good piece of NetSuite, which kind of expands your horizon on tracking work orders. Now we'll talk about the setup of items as WIP assemblies. Typically, what you would do is set up assembly item records. So on the purchasing inventory subtab, based on multi-location inventory, if you have that setting, you could set up WIP just for a specific location. So there's only one manufacturing facility out of your 10 facilities. 9 of them are distribution centers. One of them, you just need to check WIP. Let's say at the San Francisco location, then you can check the WIP box for that. Then there's a special work order item flag, which you need to check on the inventory management section of your assembly item record. And that generates or sets a flag on the sales order to create a work order. So you auto-generate a work order when you save a sales order. Then you have accounting preferences. When we're talking about that, we're talking about 3 different accounts that need to be set up for WIP. One is the WIP cost variance account, and this is basically expense account for actual cost or average cost assemblies, and when the reconciliation amount cannot be returned to the asset account because the amount has been shipped. The account is required if WIP is checked for any locations. Again, there's also the scrap account, which is an expense account at time of completion to capture how much quantity is scrapped and what's the purchase price or average cost for that item. And then there's a default WIP account or the asset account used when a work order completion component issue is entered. And then on the work order itself, there's a WIP checkbox. Typically, it would be enabled when you say that the work order is firmed and released. But you want to double check that that WIP box is checked on the work order. Next, we'll dive into what is discrete manufacturing. When we are producing a single item and we assign a serial number, or let's say a VIN number in case of a car, it goes through different routing operations like metal forming, coating and washing, painting, final assembly, and shipping. So there's different routing steps with operation sequences, dates, and times that that operation has to happen before the next operation happens. So you can produce single items coming off of a line, which is discrete manufacturing. Now, this could be applied to printed circuit boards. It could be used to different laptop production or automotive vehicles. Then we have process manufacturing, where you can mix several ingredients, and you have a process of cooking, baking, or mixing. In this case, we have dog food, which is going to be produced. We take the ingredients like beef, peas, and corn. We cook it together and processed into beef meal, pea protein, and corn gluten. And then you mix everything together with supplements, and you get under heat to form a dough. And then you have intense heat and pressure. So you're cooking 4 times in essence, and you're cutting into desired shape, and you're drying in an oven and getting the end dog food. But now here's the thing. These are produced in batches, and the units of measure typically pounds, ounces, gallons. It's not a single each. It's a kind of like a continuous batch production process where you would put sometimes fixed issuance quantities, and then the completion quantity can keep varying. It could be more completion quantity, which added at a later stage. And we'll walk through a scenario for this. So the basic manufacturing differences are process versus discrete. Like we're saying, process is in batches. We have lots, grades, potency, and shelf life for process manufactured items. You have multiple recipes and formulas. We have co-products, useful products which come out of the process, like in this case it was dog food. And then byproducts like waste, which we have to dispose. And you basically have a unit of measure which is material specific, like pounds or gallons in the oil industry. So then also you use mixing, blending, or transforming or cooking to get the end product, to make stuff. Discrete is you have serial numbers, engineering change notifications. You're building, assembling, fabricating, painting, or using complex multi-level bonds, part number driven, standard parts and components, and you're making things. That's a pretty simple comparison. And all of these are available in NetSuite. So let's go through a make to order situation. I know there's demand planning where you can, build a supply order to a forecast. So if you have a forecast from a demand plan, you can create a supply order and then use WIP on that. Now, this scenario we're talking about here is make to order. You have a sales order with demand, and you can generate a work order from a sales order. Here, the typical setup is you have to have a location on the sales order, a customer, special work order item, and the work order is created with the associated sales order. You do have to set up manufacturing preferences to default the status of the work order when it's generated from a sales order. So it could be open planned, firm planned, or released. You have the option of setting everything to planned, like open planned, and have a save search for planners to actually go in and release only the work orders, for example, that they need to produce on a certain week. That way they don't have, 20 different work orders when you really only need 2 work orders, and you're not, you're not like stacking up all the work when you actually only need 2 work orders. So you can have a save search to change the status of the work order from planned to released. And then there's the ordering of items. So let's say we have purchase ingredients in our process manufacturing scenario, let's say for pet food. We have all these purchased ingredients that we need to acquire from a vendor. You can set up replenishment method as reorder point on the item tab of the purchasing inventory tab. And you can set up multiple reorder multiple. So you get a deal from the vendor. So if you order multiple quantities, like 100 or 1,000, you get a better deal. And then you can set up preferred stock levels or reorder points on the inventory item record. So this could be a manual setting where you can define the preferred stock level and reorder point. Safety stock would be another important point. Or you can have the system automatically calculated for you based on past history. Okay, so the formula for calculating the quantity to order in the case of a purchasing scenario is the preferred stock level plus the back ordered quantity minus the availability minus the on order. So this is per location, right? So each location is unique, and the inventory at each location should be considered. Now here's the situation where we talked about material issuance. Let's say we want to issue material upfront, like in our process manufacturing scenario. You would perform the issuance upfront and then do the prior to the close and the completion. So you could perform multiple work order issuance or a single work order issuance. Okay, and if you notice the bottom, there's a GL impact on this slide. It tells you there's a credit to the component asset account in that location and a debit to WIP for the component asset. So we'll see the GL impact when we walk through the example in our demo. Then we have the work order completion. The work order completion record is used to indicate that the assemblies have been built. In process manufacturing, for example, we have mixing and cooking. The completed quantity could keep increasing with fixed quantity consumption. So basically, for a work order that's producing bulk quantity, like pet foods, oil, or antiperspirant, you could have a separate step where you fix the issuance quantity prior to a completion. Okay, so you can record scrap at the time of completion too. So, for example, let's say I'm producing bulk for pet foods, and I find out that some of the scrap has to be reported. I can record the scrap at the time of completion. And if you notice, you'd have to define an inventory detail for the completed quantity with a lot number and quantity built. And the GL impact, you see that there's a debit to the assembly asset account and a credit to WIP to the assembly asset. So we'll see this again through the demo. We'll go through a detailed GL impact review. Then the next piece is completions with Backflush. So let's say we want to perform issuance at time of completion. This can be performed when you do packaging. You typically put things in a box or in a container or a pallet. You know all the materials that needs to be issued at that step. So at the time of completion, you can issue material. So that's just an example. This could be applied to both discrete and process. Typically, you can have operational routing steps. At each operation, you can perform a completion. We gave an example here for 5 components, and the completed quantity is 60 units. Then you have 300 of the component items are issued. Okay, so based on the routings, you can define where in the routing you want to perform a completion of backflush. Then we have the work order close. So the cool piece of NetSuite, the cool feature is when you close the work order, you can track variances. There's a bulk work order close or a single work order close. If you're a small operation, you can use a single work order close. But if you're a huge operation, you can use bulk work order close to close multiple work orders. There's a underproduced variance tolerance percentage field. So you have to enter a percentage to close only orders that produce less than planned. So you put 50%, anything that has been completed less than 50% will show up in the grid, and you can complete all those, or sorry, close those work orders. In the production variance tolerance percentage, again, this is remaining WIP value by the WIP of the assembly. It's a variance percentage you can define. So when you're doing a bulk close, this only works for the bulk close. So these percentage tolerance percentages are for the bulk close, and you can basically close based on those variance percentages. So when we perform a close, the GL impact is the reconciliation entries to post variance. That is, debit to WIP assembly assets, credit to WIP component asset, and debit to WIP variance account. Okay, so next we will dive into a demo for work in process. Let me get NetSuite up and running here. So let's first look at our assembly item. In our assembly item, we talked about the setup. And if we notice here, we have the inventory management tab. We have to set it up as special work order item. So when you generate a work order from a sales order, it'll mark the WIP flag is checked on the sales order line. Okay, and then if we notice here on this, we do have a WIP checkbox, and it says yes. So San Francisco, we have the WIP checked. So we're going to track the production process of this work order in San Francisco for the WIP. Then let's go into the inventory item. So this is the component under that assembly, which we're going to go through in this demo. And if you notice here, we have set this up to reorder point replenishment method. We're not ordering in multiples. A good practice would be set up multiple order quantities. That way we're not, creating too many purchase orders, or we're creating purchase orders based on a deal we have with the vendor. Okay, and also you can auto calculate reorder points, or you can auto calculate preferred stock levels, or you can manually enter those preferred stock levels and reorder points. So in this scenario, we've actually manually added the reorder point and stock levels. Okay, and it is important to define these to be accurate in your ordering. Okay, so here, if you notice, we have a quantity back order of 360 and a quantity on order of 60. Okay, so these are some cool pieces of functionality. Now, on the assembly item itself, there's another piece I needed to show you on the accounting tab. Let's see. Okay, so here's the accounting tab. There's 3 accounts: the WIP cost variance account, scrap account, and WIP account. These default in from the accounting preferences. So cost accountant or the finance team can define what these accounts need to be. If you need to just change it on that specific assembly, you can. So it's all dependent on your chart of account setup and where you want it to decide. Sorry. So the next piece that we're going to talk about is generating a work order from a sales order. So let me quickly show you the scenario where we have a sales order here. The screen a little bigger. Okay, so here I have a sales order for Zenith, and the location is San Francisco. I have the item NS Assembly 2 for quantity 10. Okay, and if I notice, the create work order flag is set to yes because we said it was a special work order item. Okay. Now, when you save the sales order, it automatically generates a work order. Notice work order 724 got created. Okay. Now what we need to do is make sure that the ingredients are available. So what you can do is go to the order items screen. So if you go under transactions, inventory, and if you go to order items, the order items tab, you can go to reorder point items. Here under this, you have the NS component 7-day item, which is a ingredient or stocked item under the finished good item. We're in our example, we're just going to walk through a discrete scenario, but it can be applied to process manufacturing too. Okay, so our preferred stock level, as we saw on the component item on the inventory record, was 100. The reorder point is 100, and basically what we're going to do is take the preferred stock level plus the back order quantity. That's 460. Subtract it from the availability, subtract it from the on order quantity to come up with 212. So if today I placed a purchase order, I would get a purchase order for 212 to my vendor. Okay, so that is a important piece to remember, because otherwise you're going to sit on the same work order for a week if this was 7 days. So what the best practice would be to enter the sales order ahead of time and plan ahead of time, and make sure that you have the right amount of inventory available. You don't want a stock out situation. At the same time, you don't want to carry too much inventory. So the optimum decision needs to be made in ordering these items. And this is where this becomes critical, items, okay? All right, so next, let's go back to our example here. So we've generated the work order for an order quantity of 10 based on what's required on the sales order, right? So we are referencing the sales order on the work order. It's at a release status and affirmed. And remember in our PowerPoint, we talked about a save search. So you can set up the manufacturing preference to say this is open and planned, and then have the planner move it to a firmed and release status. Only at a firmed and release status is the WIP checkbox ticked. So here, if you notice, released and firmed, the WIP checkbox is ticked. Okay. All right. So here, if we scroll down, we're going to perform a work order issuance. What we're doing in this example is performing a single work order issuance, and we're fixing the issuance quantity. So we're going to issue 35, right? And we have to define the inventory detail for issuance. If this was a process manufacturing, you would need a lot number. Typically, if this was a car, you'd have a serial number or a VIN number. Okay, how much parts are you issuing? Okay, and then you have the GL impact. Now, this is important. This basically considers the WIP debit account. It takes the material issued, which is 35, times the average cost on the location. So that's the 2.1403508, and you get the $74.91 on the GL impact. Then you also have the inventory WIP. So basically, you calculate the 35 times the 2.1403508. So you get the inventory WIP, and you get the inventory to be 74.91. Right? Okay. Now, another piece to note is the issuance, which can be done on a bulk quantity of orders. So you can issue multiple work orders at the same time. So here what you can do is you can put the subsidiary, like United States. If you notice on the grid, you can perform issuance for multiple work orders, right? And this gives you that opportunity. So I just thought I'd point that out. Next, what we want to do is go to a completion. So let's say either in discrete or process manufacturing, we want to keep the issuance separate and the completion separate. You can perform that in NetSuite by performing a completion as a separate process. Okay, so from the work order screen, you can say enter completion. Okay, and on on there, you can define how much you want to build. So in this case, I want to build 5, which is a partial completion. And I want to scrap a quantity of 1. So here, I'm basically going to scrap 1, and I'm going to build 5. And you can define the inventory detail for that. And what this does is it takes the last purchase price on the item location, 12.486, okay, and it multiplies it with a completed quantity. So you get the 1210 inventory debit of 62.43, which is basically putting that assembly to stock. And then you have for the scrap account, the 5026 manufacturing scrap. It takes a scrap quantity of 1 times the last purchase price, and you get $12.48. Now you can complete 15. So for example, I'm going to change my completion quantity from 5 to 15. So either in a process or discrete manufacturing situation, this is a very normal process where you can always complete more than what is needed. So I complete 15, and in an average costing situation, it adjusts the GL impact accordingly. And we're going to see that the last purchase price is 4.682 for the assembly. So the GL impact, the 1210 inventory account, takes the 15 times the 4.682, and it gives $70.23. And the scrap, notice the scrap also adjusts based on the last purchase price at San Francisco. So scrap quantity of 1 times 4.68, you get the $4.68. Okay, so that's the completion. Next, we're going to look at work order close. So in a small operation, you can perform a single work order close. So our work order quantity is 10, and we're going to close this. When we close it, we get our GL impact at the time of close, and we get our variances. So if you look at the WIP register, remember we defined this on the assembly item record. We set up the WIP variance account 5027. So it shows the $70.23, and then it also shows the $4.68, which is a scrap. It also shows a decrease, okay, and also it also shows the completion amounts and the issuance amount. So if you look at your WIP register, all of them will be accounted for. Before we get into completion with Backflush, let me show you something real quick on let's see, bulk work order close. So manufacturing, you can close work orders on a bulk. So here what you can do is define your subsidiary, in this case United States, include in-process work orders. Notice how you can control what you want to see on the grid to close out. So if you want to do a bulk close of many work orders, you can. You can define what's the tolerance percentage, underproduced variance tolerance percentage, that adjusts what work orders needs to show up here. Similarly here, so for example, let's say this underproduced variance tolerance, right? So you had like 10, but you only completed 5, right? So it's 50%. So if you put 50, you'll see all those work orders that need to be. Similarly here, this is based on the WIP. So what's required on the, what's the actual WIP, what's based on versus the ratio of what's the expected WIP amount. And then you can basically narrow down the work orders. Again, if I reduce this, let's say to 10%, if you notice, the amount of work orders also reduces, okay? So those are situations where you can control by bulk, and you can also fine tune them by date range. That way you're not seeing 1,000 work orders if you're a big operation, okay? And you can do it based on production start date. Then let me go back to a Backflush scenario or an example. So let's say we have another work order 720, which we created. We want to perform a completion of Backflush. Like I was talking about packaging or finished goods, we want to issue material at time of completion. So you perform the issue and completion at the same time, and you also review the GL impact. It captures the issuance and the completion at the same time. So here I'm going to produce 2. Again, it's released, firmed, and it's whipped. And if you notice, you can perform the completion. When after the completion, there's a backflush flag which needs to be enabled. And after the completion, the projected value is populated. So if you notice here, I'm issuing 5. We are defining the inventory detail for the parent assembly and the issued components. Otherwise, it won't let you do the backflush. Here we see the GL impact. The inventory which is put to stock is $10.70, which is a debit. And then there's a credit for $10.70 to WIP. And then the basic issuance also happens. So there's a credit and a debit to WIP. So that's an issuance and a completions. So that's pretty much our demo for today. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to GSI and we will be able to answer your questions. Otherwise, thank you and have a great day.